southern regions. The government has dispatched military airplanes and naval vessels to deliver aid. Our correspondent Gretchen Malalad reports from Manila.
Most of the people living in the flooded areas have already been brought to safety and are now in evacuation centers. And rescue teams have shifted into helping in clearing and rehabilitation efforts of the affected provinces. So thousands of troops from the police, military, and Coast Guard are on the ground trying to help in clearing the debris from roads like fallen trees and electrical poles. They are also helping residents in rehabilitating their homes. The Philippine National Police, whose thousands of personnel are now on the ground, reported that at least 375 people have been killed. 56 people are still reported missing, while around 500 people sustained injuries. Many provinces affected by the typhoon have declared a state of calamity. Around 400,000 people living along coastal areas are left homeless. All of their houses have been shattered into pieces, and an official from the Philippine National Red Cross described the typhoon aftermath as complete carnage. Hospitals, homes, and schools were ripped to shreds. President Rodrigo Duterte has visited affected areas of Bohol and Cebu. He has also led the distribution of relief goods and talked to some survivors of the typhoon. A few days ago, President Duterte said that the government funds are almost dry from fighting the pandemic, but he pledged that $40 million will be allotted for aid and rehabilitation of the affected provinces. Meanwhile, Chinese ambassador to the Philippines, Wang Xilian, says that Chinese relief goods are on their way to affected areas. 20,000 food packages containing rice and canned food will be distributed to the provinces of Cebu, Bohol, Siargao, and Cagayan de Oro. Also, around 5 million kilograms of Chinese government-donated rice are now being urgently transported to typhoon-affected areas.
Russia says urgent responses are needed from the United States concerning its security demands. Moscow has sent a wish list of security proposals to Washington, including a promise that NATO will give up any military activity in Eastern Europe and Ukraine. Washington says some of the proposals are unacceptable but will respond later this week. Stuart Smith has more now from Moscow.
Russia published two lists, one for the United States and one for NATO. From the US, it's demanding undefined assurances that neither side should do anything to affect the national security of the other. Also, that neither side will deploy its military and weapons in areas where it could be perceived by the other as a threat, except on each country's respective territory. From NATO, Russia wants assurances members will not conduct military activity in Ukraine, Eastern Europe, the Caucasus, or Central Asia. NATO says it wants to work on strengthening confidence-building measures if Russia takes concrete steps to reduce tensions in the region, referring to Western intelligence that more than 100,000 Russian troops are massing at the Ukrainian border. The US says it will respond to Russia this week and that it's going to put its concerns on the table. But without urgent progress, Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov said Russia could be forced to adopt a counter-strategy and start deploying intermediate-range nuclear missiles in Europe. Stuart Smith, CGTN, Moscow.
Meanwhile, Hong Kong has just elected its 7th-term Legislative Council. Results for all 90 seats have been released after over 1.3 million voters cast their ballots on Sunday. It is the region's first Legislative Council election after changes to the electoral system earlier this year under the principle of patriots administering Hong Kong. Let's take a look.
Suggesting those so-called oppositions formerly involved in anti-China activities are not eligible to compete in the election. It doesn't necessarily mean that all the opposition members are completely excluded. Actually, there were several representatives, and Mr. T. Chun-yo on social welfare issues is again returned to the legislature. Now, the Chief Executive of Hong Kong Special Administrative Region, Carrie Lam, said on Monday that she is quite looking forward to working with the new members, hailing what she called broad representation of the newly elected 90 legislators. But we know that there's more work to do for the government, aside from the enactment of laws, including improving its public relations, expanding knowledge about the change in its policies, and then keeping those promises. And the social unrests back in 2019 and in some early years are definitely lessons. So some locals I spoke with said they are still in lack of confidence about the governance, and some were tentative about the new electoral system, and let's hear what some had to say.
There are no voices from the opposition side. If there are even just some opposing opinions, they will send signals to the local government and the central government to indicate what Hong Kong people are thinking. But now, there will not be many of these signals.
The election has not changed much. I only voted for the candidates that I know of. The election is more or less the same to me. I've been living here in Hong Kong for several decades.
So soon after the election, countries from the Five Eyes, which is an intelligence alliance, including the US, UK, Canada, Australia and New Zealand, expressed grave concerns over the change in the electoral system, saying it has reversed what they consider the contested elections in the past by eliminating oppositions. Meanwhile, Beijing issued a white paper Monday saying that there was no democracy in Hong Kong under the British rule. It said facts have proven time and again the anti-China agitators in Hong Kong and the external groups behind them must be held to account for impeding Hong Kong's progress toward democracy.
And that's it for this edition of The World Today. I'll be back shortly with more news from the continent in Africa Live. Thanks for watching.
This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
At least 3 people killed in protests over rising insecurity in eastern DRC. United Arab Emirates bans passengers from Kenya as concerns grow over the Omicron variant. Plus, we have the latest from Ethiopia, where Tigrayan rebels have withdrawn from key regions. Hello and welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Mahia Mutua in Nairobi. Also coming up, in business, South Africa's power utility firm Eskom completes the separation of its transmission divisions as part of far-reaching reforms. And in sports, 3-time champions Nigeria face uncertainty ahead of the 2021 Africa Cup of Nations finals in Cameroon. Well, we begin in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where at least 3 people have been killed during protests over rising insecurity. The demonstrators in the eastern town of Goma are also protesting over an alleged plan to deploy Rwandan troops in the area. Here is CGTN's Wanja Mungai with that story.
The protesters have been decrying what they claim is the arrival of Rwandese troops in Goma. But while expressing their dissatisfaction, the protests have turned fatal.
Our countrymen who called for a city shutdown attacked the police officers. They attacked the police officers. I know a police superintendent who was killed. His body is in the morgue. He was shot dead at his service post in Rukoko, at the Nyiragongo police station. His body is at the morgue.
The other 2 casualties are civilians, also killed on Monday. The demonstrators have been blocking the streets in the eastern town with makeshift barricades and stones. They say they are tired of insecurity, regional violence, and attacks by armed groups. To them, the Rwandese troops are not offering a solution to any of their problems.
We are angry because our army is supposed to be one of the best in Africa, but we learned that it has just asked for help. How come?
The government has denied the claims regarding Rwandan troops coming to help. Recently, at least 1,700 Ugandan troops were sent to the DRC to battle the Allied Democratic Forces, an insurgent group linked to a spate of deadly attacks. North Kivu and Ituri provinces in the east have been in turmoil for decades, causing massive deaths and displacement. In order to quell the atrocities in the east, President Felix Tshisekedi announced a state of siege in May this year. That despite heavy presence of the army and a United Nations peacekeeping mission. Wanjamongai, CGTN.
Well, let's get more information on that story. We can now cross to Magene Debe, a journalist in Kinshasa. Magene, thank you for joining us. What is the situation in Goma right now? Magene, I hope you can hear me. I was just beginning by asking what the situation on the ground in Goma is right now. Well, we seem to have lost her. We will try to get Magene Deba back on the line later on. Heading to Ethiopia, though, where rebel Tigrayan forces say they have completed their withdrawal from the Amhara and Afar regions. The withdrawal, which is a step towards a possible ceasefire in the 13-month-old war between the Tigrayan forces and the Ethiopian government, comes after major territorial gains by the Ethiopian military. Let's now cross over to Girum Chala, who is in Addis Ababa, with more on that story. Girum, Tigrayan forces, as we're hearing, have withdrawn from Amhara and Afar regions. What is the latest situation on the ground there?
Well, Maya, at the moment in the northern part of the country, especially in the Amhara regional state where war was recently active, we have heard that because of the Ethiopian National Defense Force and other forces under the Prime Minister's leadership took over, have retaken most of the cities, including the city of Lalibela, Waldia and others. There is no much of fighting going on at the moment. As they said, first mission has been completed of freeing the Amhara regional state. First, you remember that the Afar regional state has been freed from the rebel force. Now, this is a victory that has been announced by the state media, the government offices and everyone else, including the ANDF force themselves. But as you've said, TPLF is saying that they have withdrawn their troops for strategic purposes first, and now they are saying that this can pave way perhaps for any peaceful resolution of the conflict in the north. In general terms, what we know is that war is now subsiding, the conflict is now being stopped everywhere, as there is no reason, at least for now, for both parties to fight, as the Amhara and Afar regional states are free. But we have to also understand that the humanitarian situation still remains to be dire in the northern part of the country.
And Girum, the rebels do say that they're hoping for peace negotiations following the withdrawal. What's been the reaction from the Ethiopian government to this?
So time and again, Ethiopian authorities have been responding in a similar term, if you like, for the call of sitting for roundtable discussions with the rebels. They are saying that, yes, peaceful resolution of the conflict is important, but then again, there is no equaling. That's a quotation that I should take from the Prime Minister's office spokesperson, for instance, who said these things again and again, saying there is no equaling a rebel group which went rogue against the constitutional order of the country and a democratically elected government seated in Addis Ababa. So they're saying that the rebels must withdraw at the beginning, and they should put down their arms, and they should recognize the constitutional order for any perhaps type of discussion to be held. On the other hand, Mahia, we have to understand that Ethiopia, through its prime minister, who announced his plan of resolving conflict in the country. When he came into office, he said that there is going to be a national dialogue, which is now under preparation. We hear from authorities here that is expected to resolve any perhaps a problem, including border problems between regional states and the one active problem that is in the north with the Tigray regional state. So this national dialogue is expected to be staged, and it's going to be an all-inclusive national dialogue. So perhaps, and to be honest with you, there might not be any negotiation that we can see anytime soon with TPLF force, between the government and the TPLF force, but we can see soon enough a national dialogue which is going to be an all-inclusive one to resolve any problem in the country.
All right, Girum, thank you very much for speaking to us on Africa Live on the situation in northern Ethiopia. CGTN's Girum Chala there in Addis Ababa. Well, taking you back to our earlier story where we reported that at least 3 people have been killed during protests in the Democratic Republic of Congo over rising insecurity. We can now speak to Magene Deba, a journalist in Kinshasa, who is back on the line for us. Magene, what is the situation in Goma as it stands right now?
The situation in Goma is very controversial today. On one side, the schools and all the business are open because late in the evening yesterday, the local authorities, they went and told people that they have to do their work normally. So everyone went to their normal activity. On the other side, we have many checkpoints. That was only yesterday because the local authorities, they don't want what happened yesterday to come again today. So they might be some probable other ways of protest. So for them to prevent of that, they decided to set so many checkpoints by the police within the city.
All right, Magene Deba, thank you very much for speaking to us on Africa Live. Moving on, at least 1 person has died and over 300 injured after security forces stopped a sit-in protest in Sudan's capital, Khartoum. That says, according to the Central Committee of Sudanese Doctors, a sit-in protest was planned to take place in front of the presidential palace. Security forces allegedly fired live rounds into the air and used tear gas and water cannons to break up the demonstration. Demonstrators were pushing for the adoption of a completely civilian transitional council. The UAE has imposed a 24-hour ban on all passenger flights from Kenya. The ban took effect on Monday. Inbound and transit flights have been suspended amid a surge of COVID-19 cases in Kenya. However, cargo freights and passenger flights from the UAE to Kenya have not been affected. Kenya will join a number of African countries currently banned from entering the UAE. They include the Republic of Congo and Nigeria. Well, let's now bring in Sadiq Shaban, who is live for us in Doha. Good to see you, Sadiq. Just tell us more about this ban and what prompted it.
Mahia, I'd like to just begin with overnight breaking news here from Qatar, which announced that they have now confirmed their first cases of Omicron virus. And overnight also they have announced that they've conducted 131, rather they have confirmed 131 cases of local transmission and 46 cases among the travelers and no death so far. So Qatar is on a high alert after this, and the Kenyan ambassador has been speaking to me this morning, and he said they have not received any information that the Qatar government would take a similar move to ban flights from Doha. So at the moment, flights from Doha to Nairobi are going on as scheduled. Now, Dubai says Nairobi will have to take measures, appropriate measures to prevent the spread of Omicron virus into Dubai. This move by Dubai puts Nairobi squarely on its defense in terms of containing the numbers that have been received here, because Dubai contends this is a high travel season, and other African countries, including Kenya, must play their part in mitigating the spread of Omicron virus. So we expect that this embargo will be lifted perhaps, or a new information will be given, a new direction in the next few hours. But at the moment, flights from Dubai into Nairobi are allowed, but flights from Nairobi into the UAE are not.
And Sadiq, obviously plenty of uncertainty surrounding travel around the world, but how is the ban now affecting travel between the two countries, especially at this time when holiday travel is expected to surge?
Mahia, where I am in Qatar, the Kenyan community and some African communities are on high alert, hoping that no similar measures will be taken as far as the situation here is concerned. Dubai just announced that by the end of the second week of December, they had received about 1.6 million passengers through their busiest Terminal 3 airport. And this is going to have an impact on travel between Africa, particularly Kenya, and Dubai, and the communities around the African communities who comprise of a big number of specialized workers working in the Middle East. This is a time they are going home for holiday, for December holiday and New Year festivities. So they are worried that if this embargo continues, then they may have to stay here for longer. But we know already that the World Health Organization and the United Nations has warned against these kind of measures, saying it prevents intelligence sharing and collective efforts to fight the spread of COVID-19.
All right, Sadiq, thank you very much for those updates. CGTN Sadiq Shaban joining us from Doha in Qatar. Moving on, during the FOCAC summit, which took place in Senegal, President Xi Jinping pledged 1 billion COVID-19 vaccine doses to Africa. Well, Zimbabwe is the first African country to receive doses under this new initiative. Astatal has more.
A chartered Air Zimbabwe flight arrived on Monday with a consignment of Sinovac vaccines. The donation is part of a new initiative announced by President Xi Jinping to donate 1 billion COVID-19 vaccine doses to Africa. Zimbabwe's vice president, who also serves as a country's health minister, was on hand to receive the shipment.
Indeed, Zimbabwe is grateful that it is among the first countries to receive COVID-19 vaccine donations from the People's Republic of China under this new initiative. The donation is also cementation of the excellent comprehensive strategic partnership between the two sister countries.
At Senegal FOCAC meeting, President Xi Jinping announced that China would provide another 1 billion doses of vaccine to Africa. China always honors its promises and walks the talk. In light of the surging fourth wave in Zimbabwe, China has moved even faster to implement President Xi Jinping's pledge. In a matter of weeks, 1 million doses of Chinese vaccines are delivered to the hands of our Zimbabwean brothers and sisters. It is a timely boost to Zimbabwe's confidence and capacity in coping with the pandemic. The decisive and efficient actions by China shows a firm and clear attitude. Whenever the African people need us, China will continuously provide vaccines for African countries until Africa's complete victory over the pandemic.
In addition to donations, China has sent experts and medical teams to help Africa in its fight against the coronavirus pandemic. Astatal, CGTN.
Right, well, it's time for us to take a short break here on Africa Live. Here's what's coming up when we return. Pests and diseases dash the hopes of coffee farmers in Uganda.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Now, the Egyptian Health Ministry has confirmed the nation's first 3 Omicron cases. All 3 are from inbound travelers. Egypt has been stepping up its viral containment measures, especially at airports, in an attempt to contain the new COVID-19 variant. Here is CGTN's Adel Mahroui with more details.
Egypt has officially confirmed its first cases of the new COVID-19 variant Omicron. Tests at international land, sea and airport entry points confirmed 26 COVID-19 cases on Friday. Genomic characterization tests of those inbound travelers identified 3 Omicron cases.
Egypt has been for a month following a new protocol to face the COVID-19 new variants. It immediately deports inbound passengers who test positive after using a new rapid test called ID Now. Egyptians who test positive will directly be transported to a local quarantine public facility. A PCR test is then conducted within 7 days.
Omicron is going to be the dominant strain globally in the coming period. Omicron is highly transmissible, and the confirmation of these first cases sets in motion the beginning of tougher measures in the coming period. We shouldn't be scared though, and we must expect more cases nonetheless. The same happened with Delta and Delta Plus variants, which are dominant here.
Egypt's government is once again reinforcing public protective measures. Face masks are mandatory at all theaters, shopping malls and mass gatherings. Public offices now require that all visitors and employees be vaccinated.
We have been having a steady infection rate for some time at around 900 cases daily. This is because of measures in place which to a great extent limited the death toll. This is very positive because the occupancy rates at hospitals have been somewhat steady as well. Add to that the vaccination campaign, we should do well in facing the coming wave.
This week, the Egyptian Health Ministry began a campaign for a non-mandatory booster shot. So far, 39 million citizens have received 1 dose of a COVID-19 vaccine, and more than 18 million Egyptians are fully vaccinated. Egypt's end-of-year target is 23 million citizens. 500,000 children, 12 to 15 years, have been so far vaccinated since the government allowed that age category to get the COVID-19 shot earlier in December. And as the year comes to an end, Cairo is banning all mass New Year's celebration events. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Let's take you to East Africa now, where coffee farmers in Uganda are concerned about the growing threat of pests and diseases on their plantations. The diseases come at a time when Uganda's coffee industry is at its peak. Farmers are now worried that they could lose out on the high coffee prices on the market. CGTN's Hilary Ayesiga now reports.
Christopher Magara is a coffee farmer in central Uganda, but a routine check on his farm shows that the plants are affected by pests and diseases.
Previously, they were being attacked by this disease now, so we need to improve the garden. So I'm going to replace all the good bad tree, the old tree with the new planting.
Scientists confirm that the plants are being affected by leaf rust and coffee berry disease.
These are fungal diseases. They normally like very high humid areas, and they also, especially for the rust, it likes the high temperature areas. So when we are having a lot of rains and the temperatures are quite high, then you will find that the coffee leaf rust becomes more prevalent.
But a solution is in the offing. replacing the old coffee trees with disease-resistant plants. Scientists at this research institute are developing new coffee varieties that are resistant to pests and diseases. But in the meantime, they are encouraging farmers to use recommended pesticides and fungicides to keep their plants healthy. But as the farmers apply these remedies, they are also asking for more technical support.
People need to be educated about the use of fertilizers, the agrochemicals.
Latest figures from the Uganda Coffee Development Authority show that the country earned close to $630 million this year, compared to about $512 million last year. Uganda's target is to produce more than 20 million bags by 2025. And farmers like Magara are hoping to play a bigger part of this production. Hilara Isga, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Well, we're coming up on the business news here on Africa Live. Here's what's coming up. South Africa's power utility firm Eskom completes the separation of its transmission division as part of far-reaching reforms.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Juba,
Johannesburg, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Thank you for staying with us. Let's start the business off in South Africa, where the power utility Eskom says it has executed the separation of its transmission divisions subject to certain conditions. This is in line with an end December deadline set in a restructuring plan. In 2019, President Cyril Ramaphosa said the debt-laden utility would be split into 3 divisions, each focusing on generation, transmission and distribution. Eskom has relied heavily on government bailouts and frequently implements nationwide power cuts. Under the plan, the utility's generation and transmission units had to be separated by the end of December 2021 and the distribution division by December next year. Well, still in the country, South Africa has received its first shipment of liquefied natural gas from the Netherlands. A local producer, DNG Energy, is investing $5 billion in a plant that will allow it to handle bulk LNG imports. As the country tries to wean itself off using coal, fuels with comparatively lower emissions like LNG are getting more investment. Sumitra Naidu has that report.
Liquefied natural gas is not only a cleaner energy source, but also a cheaper alternative to fossil fuels.
Without energy, there's no growth. If you bring energy that is cost-effective, that is reliable, that is sustainable, it only means that people will have the confidence of saying, I can invest in a factory, I can invest in that project. It allows the sentiment to change. And when people start consuming the product, and it actually is a product that is beneficial for their bottom line, then more and more businesses get generated because of the multiplier effect of people being in the economy.
DNG is a 100% black-owned energy infrastructure company in South Africa. It has been working on this deal for several years. It also had a power supply bid in for Eskom earlier this year, but lost to Car Power. DNG is disputing the win.
DNG Power is taking up the call from our president to say that you can produce up to 100 megawatts for various customers. We have taken that call. We're starting to do it, and we want to be part of the solution. So we are there to support Eskom in the best way possible.
In the meantime, liquefied natural gas is being delivered to commercial customers in the industrial, transport, marine and power sectors in South Africa.
The benefit is reliability, it is cost effectiveness, it is sustainability. So for us, having invested through these many years in terms of having the right infrastructure for us to get to this position, it means that we become that reliable fuel partner for you. It fits into government policy because our policy is to have net zero carbon emissions by, let's say, 2050.
It's a different mindset, it's a different way of energy. We have a vision of a sustainable way of transport and to make mobility as sustainable as possible. We do expect the success of our customers. We know that this is a much cleaner source of energy, so we expect that they will have much more fuel economy on their buses and trucks. We also expect them to have a much cleaner energy on their fleets. They will contribute to a better environment for the whole country.
This development catalyzes the growth of a new gas economy in South Africa and will create much needed jobs. As a more cleaner fuel and a more sustainable fuel, liquefied natural gas will also help South Africa transition away from fossil fuels. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Well, new vehicle sales in South Africa have exceeded expectations this year, but it appears likely that sales will decline next year in line with a poorer growth performance by South Africa's economy. Angelo Coppola has the story.
The auto sector has weathered the storm of the first year of the pandemic in 2020 with just under 390,000 units sold. Projections point to 410,000 units being sold by the end of 2021. It's not been plain sailing as the local sector has faced global challenges, like the shortage of semiconductors.
And that's had a huge impact as well on manufacturers at different levels. So that certainly has put some challenges in front of the industry that we've had to navigate our way through. But I think off the back of strong GDP recovery, and that is really a spillover or pent-up demand from 2020, we've seen good industry growth coming through in the South African auto industry.
The growth hasn't happened in isolation. The auto sector has been nurtured over several decades with government incentives and pro-growth policies which have led to hundreds of millions of dollars of investments from auto manufacturers.
The policy stability, the policy coherence has translated into those investments, and those investments are bringing important contributions to production, to employment, to fiscal reflux, and to export performance from those entities.
Expectations for 2022 are a little muted, with a 1.8% growth rate expected for the South African economy, and this will impact the auto sector, analysts say.
We still anticipate that we're going to see growth above that in the auto sector, and I think that's also driven a lot by new vehicle activity. And I think if you look across all of the members of NAMSA, in spite of all the economic challenges that we've seen taking place, the investment in new models, both imported and domestically produced, has been remarkable.
With local demand a little muted in 2022, attention is turned to the African Continental Free Trade Area. The original equipment manufacturers have had detailed discussions with the African Union.
Very good progress has been made around what the auto sector on the continent could actually look like. Very detailed and engaging discussions happening in terms of what does it look like from originating content, how do we unlock opportunities for goods and services to flow freely across the African continent, and in particular, how do we structure a African auto sector that won't necessarily see production in every single country, but there will be components manufactured in one country, moving to another country, but creating and spreading the economic positive impact of an auto sector in Africa.
The auto sector incentive policy has long been held as a shining light, but one wonders why it hasn't been emulated in other industry sectors. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Let's take you to Zimbabwe, where the country's central bank has ruled out recognizing cryptocurrencies as legal tender, but is exploring the option of going for a central bank digital currency instead. The Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe plans to send a team to Nigeria to learn from the West African nation's experience in rolling out the continent's first digital currency, the e-Naira, as Farai Mwakutuya now explains from Harare.
Zimbabwean monetary authorities' aversion to cryptocurrency is well documented. In 2018, they shut down the country's first Bitcoin exchange and banned cryptocurrency trading. The central bank, which has repeatedly said it does not trust cryptocurrency, is mulling a Zimbabwean e-dollar instead. The move follows several central banks that are working on rolling out a central bank digital currency, CBDC. That would give authorities here the control they don't have over cryptocurrencies.
The one thing about cryptocurrency, especially the blockchain, is that it's decentralized. Decentralized meaning that it's controlled by thousands of nodes which are all over the place. So if you want to create more Bitcoin, you literally have to coordinate with 1 million nodes at the same time to make that decision. But with a CBDC, central bank digital currency, they still remain control, and if they want to increase the supply or decrease the supply, it's still centralized.
Authorities will hope that the adoption of this digital currency will be quick and easy in an economy where the bulk of transactions are already being done electronically. Due to persistent cash shortages, more than 80% of payments here are done electronically. If more countries adopt digital currencies, that may help facilitate direct payments between nations and help Zimbabwe circumvent Western-imposed sanctions that have prevented payments to and from the country, as the funds have to be routed through the United States.
Right now, if you want to make an RTGS payment to South Africa, you can't, because we are still on that Bretton Woods system. So now when we digitalize and we're now using a digital currency, we can make RTGS payments literally overnight. So I think it's a good thing, but as long as it's managed correctly, that's the only thing we're advocating for.
In the past, Zimbabwe's central bank has been accused of fueling money supply by printing money. Mahia Mutua, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
And here's what's coming up in the sport. Three-time champions Nigeria face uncertainty ahead of the 2021 Africa Cup of Nations finals in Cameroon.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Africa Live. Find your voice.